Hey guys, I'm so sorry I'm not going to be able to be with you today, but I at least wanted to do a screen recording showing you some of the common problems that tend to come up when doing some of these advanced skills in Illustrator with some of the illustrations. Definitely still follow along with your book and try to follow the instructions as close as possible, but these are some of the things that I tend to hear most often when working with the second half of the project, particularly dealing with the alignment and distribution of objects, and also some grouping and some of the drawing tools. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to deal with is specific, precise placement of your objects in Illustrator. One of the best things about working with vectors is that you are dealing with coordinates. And so when you're making things like icons for a web page or you're making very specific logos, oftentimes you want to be very, very precise with your placement of things. Illustrator lets you do this. The first thing we may want to know is where on the page you can place things. And to do this, I need to be able to see my rulers on my page. If you don't see them, in my case I've got them turned off, you can go up to the View drop-down menu, go all the way down to Rulers, and choose Show Rulers. Notice that the keyboard shortcut is Command R. With my rulers turned on, you can now see at the top and the left-hand side of the screen, I get a little ruler. Now the unit of measure that we're using is the same one that we used when we set up our document. In this case, we're measuring it in points. I'm not used to working in points. I would love to see good old-fashioned inches, the way the Lord intended. So to quickly change our rulers from points to inches, you can hold down your Control key, which is located at the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard. When I hold Control and click on it, I get a listing of different units of measure, and I can choose inches, and it'll automatically swap over my rulers to inches. And this is a great fast way of changing your units of measure without having to open up your system preferences and changing it that way. So the first thing we want to do is to be able to place these rounded rectangles, rounded squares that we created in a very particular place. I'm going to hit Command and the plus sign to be able to zoom in very quickly. And by the way, if you hold down your space bar, you can see my cursor change from an arrow or whatever tool I'm using to a hand. And so I can hold space bar and use this hand to click and drag around exactly where I want to go. So let's say I created this particular rounded square and I want to place it exactly 1/4 of an inch from the edge and from the top of my page. To do this, we need to open up our transform controls. There's two places you can look for it. If you're on a small screen like I am, I'm working on my laptop, you'll see the word transform at the top. Now if you're working in the computer lab, you've got a nice large screen and you won't see the word transform. Instead, you'll be seeing the X, the Y, and the height and the width coordinates for whatever object you have selected. If you don't see it and you actually want to open up a window or a palette of your transform, you can always go to Window and then down to Transform, and the Transform palette is one that you can have open and do the same thing. So with this palette open, some of the things I can do is once I've got an object selected is to give it specific X and Y coordinates, and I can also change up its height and width. The x-axis is the left and right axis, and the y-axis is up and down. The thing to remember is your reference point for where you want this to be. The reference points are located right here on the left-hand side, and you can see I can click on either the middle, the top, or the edges, depending on where I want the reference point to be on my object. In this case, I want it to be at the top and the left-hand side. So I'm going to choose the top left-hand reference point. And when I type in 1/4 of an inch on the X and Y axis, so we'll do this now, 0.25 for the X, you'll see it shift over. And the Y axis, if I type in 0.25, we'll bring it up 1/4 of an inch. Again, that's 1/4 of an inch from the top and the left-hand side. Let's do the same thing for the rounded box that's on the right-hand side of my page. Again, I'm going to select it first, and when I select it, I want it to be 1/4 of an inch from the top and 1/4 of an inch from this side. The thing to remember about this is that our page is 8.5 inches wide, so our coordinates do need to be a little bit different. I can move it up 1/4 of an inch, so that's our y-axis, 0.25. But if I move it over to 8.5 on this side, or 1/4 of an inch from 8.5, I need to actually subtract away from 8.5. That'll leave me at 8 1/4. If I type in 8 1/4 in my x-axis, 8.25, and hit return, uh-oh, what happened? It's not exactly doing what I want. It's over the edge. Remember, this is where our reference point comes in. It's still at 8 1/4, but this top left-hand corner is at 8 1/4. What I want is that top right-hand corner to be at 8 1/4. With the top right selected, now check out what happens when I type in 8.25. It moves it over exactly where it needs to be. So when you do your alignment and your placement of things, do be careful that you know exactly what reference point you have selected. I'm going to zoom out, Command and the minus sign. The rest of them, I want these other two to be evenly distributed and aligned with the rest in between these other two on the edges. I'm going to select all of them by clicking and dragging over them. You can see I've got all 4 selected now. The other type of tools I want to work with are my alignment and my distribution. With multiple objects selected, you can look at the top of your screen, and these are the buttons that I'm looking for. There is also an alignment and distribution window, and that's what this looks like. There's the align one. And I get the same options from here. If you look at the icons, you kind of get an idea for what they will do. In this case, if I wanted them to all be equally aligned along the same axis, I could choose this one on the middle right, and in one click you can see they quickly align to each other. Now notice when I did that, it will pull them down. It'll get kind of an average of their x height. So if that happens, you may need to type in their y coordinates again and move it back up to 1/4 of an inch. There we go. The next thing I need to do is I want them to be evenly distributed. I want them to be equally spaced amongst each other. When you do this, you need to be aware of what you're aligning it to. Look at the very bottom of your align palette, and if you don't see these extra options, you can click on the top. In my case, I'll hide it. You can see you don't see it. You may need to show these options. Align to will give you 3 options. Either the selection, which is what I have now, a key object, which is what we'll use later, or I can align things to my entire artboard, the page that I have. With Align to Selection selected, when I choose to distribute these objects evenly, in this case I'm going to again choose the horizontal distribution. In one click you can see now they're evenly spaced between each other, and it works out really, really well. To use some of the other kinds of alignment, and this is what's going to happen for your different icons that you'll choose from, we'll want to align these icons so that they're perfectly aligned with the squares that you created. If I was to place them in here, I want them to be right in the center. To do this, I'm going to select one of the little icons that we have, hold down Shift, and select another one. With both of them selected, I'll choose Align to, and in this case, I'm going to choose a key object. When I chose key object, you can see that this one was highlighted. This is going to make this the key object, and I don't want that. I want my square to be the key object. So I'm going to click on the square again, and you can now see the square has been highlighted. And if I align it both vertically this way and horizontally, you can see now it's vertically and horizontally right there in the center. Let's do the same thing for the little hiker dude. Put it down, hold down Shift and select both of them. For our Align to, we're going to select it as a key object. Again, a click on your square, and then do the vertical and horizontal alignment to put them in here. If you accidentally select both of the objects, do align to key object, and you kept it as this one, it's not going to move your icon. Instead, if I did that, it'll start moving my square, which obviously is what I don't want. I can hit Command Z and easily undo that. Again, let's click on my square, and then I can align it to that one. And you'll need to do the same thing for each of the other icons that you create. Remember, the book is only going to show you the first 4. It's going to be up to you to do the other 4 so that you have 8 of them total done. Alright, so that's as far as it goes for alignment and distribution and placement of the specific things that you have. Let's look in our layers palette and see what we're working with. In my layers, I've got all of my templates right here in the middle, and I've got layer 1, which has my background, my little squares on there. I'm going to lock them down. And in our icon art, we're going to be doing all of our drawing inside of this particular layer. This is sort of similar to what the book has got it set up as well. I've already drawn off my little picnic symbol. I'm going to zoom in on it. And you'll find when you create this symbol, it's going to be made up of a variety of different rectangles, and you'll skew and transform each one of those and copy them. What I would like to be able to do, if I was to select this object, I'd always have to, since it's multiple objects, drag over it, or I'd have to hold down Shift and select all of them. I would really love to just with one click treat this as one particular object. As a matter of fact, if I go to zoom in on my icon art layer, you can see all of these are their own separate paths. To group multiple paths together, you can first of all select all of them and check out the Object drop-down menu. One of the options is to group them, Command G. With them grouped together, now check out my Layers palette. Now I've got a group and it's all in the same icon. This means if I deselect it by clicking off and click on any one path, it's going to select all of them. Groups of icons makes it, groups of objects makes it very, very easy to quickly select and manipulate entire objects that you've created that are alike and similar. And I can take this one again and move it into place as needed. The second thing we can do is do some joining of different strokes and lines that we create. You'll be doing this for this particular line man. Again, the book is going to go into more detail, but here's the basics of what we're going to use. I'll move our layers out of the way. I'm going to open my stroke palette. The stroke palette will give me all of my options for changing up the lines that we create. We can use our line segment tool. Again, it's hiding underneath the different line drawing tools if you don't see it. With this one, I'm able to draw very straight and specific lines. You can see I can click and drag and it creates a little green line. It may be a little difficult to see. Let's change that to a red color. So there we go. Now we can see it. With that line selected, I can easily change the weight of it, and I can make it roughly the weight of his body. Again, if I need to move it, I can use my path tool, my selection tool, or I can use my white arrow tool to click on a specific anchor point and move it up. Some of the other options, for instance, I want to be able to round off for his feet and shoulders. So look in our stroke is our cap. We'll let us give a rounded cap to it. And let's draw off another one. So I'll draw my line segment tool, grab it. I want it to start exactly right here. I want to actually join this line with this line. To do that, when I hover over that anchor point, you can see the word anchor will appear, and I know I'm right on top of it. And I can click and drag and draw another line along with it. The cool thing about making these lines is that I just made 2 different lines. If I wanted to join both of these paths together, it can be a little tricky, but here's how to do it. First off, if I was to move this one over, you can see I've got 2 different lines, and I want to make sure both of them are right on top of each other. I'm going to use my white arrow to select both of these paths. So both of these single points is selected. I can then go to Object, down to Path, and join them together. Watch what happens when I join them. Funny little triangle tends to appear. Here's what's happening. When you join the two paths together, it actually creates what's called a little miter joint. Think of it as kind of carving into a line or drawing a line. It has to have a corner of some sort, and this is the corner that you created. Well, since I've got rounded endpoints to it, I'd love to be able to have rounded corners. And if I look in my stroke palette, you can see that one of the options is to have a rounded joint. Here it is right here. When I select it, you can see it rounds it over as well. The book is also going to go into working in preview mode versus outline mode. Right now I'm in preview mode, which means it'll show me exactly the way it should print or preview on my screen. But if I go up to view, I can go down to outline, and now I can see, instead of just the colors and the strokes that I have, all I'm seeing are my lines that I'm working with. It does show me my JPEGs of my template layers that I have, but other than that, if I zoom back out, you're not seeing any other color. You can even see on my table that I have, all I'm seeing is my outline and my vector paths. So if you ever need to work really precise and you don't want to get in the way of all the other things that you've created, sometimes you want to work in outline mode. To go back to preview mode, click on View and choose Preview. Yours may say something like GNU or GSU Preview. I am working on an older version of Illustrator right now. So that's about joining paths and creating little extra different kinds of strokes with the to create the little walking man. Since I am working on an older version of Illustrator, one of the tools I don't have access to is the Shaper tool. It's a really cool tool, and when I get back I should be able to show you some specific things to do with it. Long story short, with the Shaper tool you're able to quickly draw off these different shapes, erase them away, and in a few clicks be able to create this icon. The one I do want to show you is the Pencil tool, and you'll use the Pencil tool to draw off free-form organic type shapes. If you're looking at this flame, you can see there's really no basic shape that I can use to draw off those flames. The rectangle, the star, the polygon won't give me what I want. What I want to do is to be able to draw and trace off exactly what I see here. To do that, look for the tool called the Pencil tool, and this is going to be hiding underneath your Shape tool in the newest version of Illustrator. Remember, you can click and hold, and that will pull out the rest of these different tools that you can't see. With the Pencil tool, I'm going to load up, in my case, just a regular black stroke and show you how it works. When you click and drag, Illustrator is going to track the movement of your mouse, and when you let go, it'll draw a vector path based on what you've drawn. And this is really good for doing this kind of drawing. If you've ever read the comic book Dilbert, the Scott Adams, the creator of that, he uses Illustrator and he uses the Pencil tool to do the drawing of his comic. It makes it look for very natural, realistic style of drawing, especially for cartoons, to give you nice crisp edges. There are some options associated with the Pencil tool. If you double click on the icon, this will pull up your Pencil tool options. Now yours is going to look a little bit different than what I'm seeing here, but the layout or the icons should be roughly the same. The first thing you're going to change is your fidelity. Fidelity simply means how true is it to the actual lines you're creating. I believe in your version it should say something like, should it be smooth or should it be accurate? Long story short, the higher the fidelity, the more accurate of a drawing you're going to get. So watch this. If I was to draw a circle with a high fidelity, you can see it only has a few points to it. I think there's 1 point here, there, and there. But if I was to lower the fidelity, and the smoothness is also part of it as well. If I had a really smooth or not so smooth, but if I was to lower the fidelity to within a few pixels, watch what happens when I try to draw the same circle. I have much more points in this case. The higher the accuracy that you have, the more points it's going to give, versus the lower accuracy, excuse me, let me grab my selection tool, versus a lower accuracy will give me fewer points in a much smoother line. And this is something that you just kind of have to play around with for when you're drawing. Now, if I'm working with this flame, it does have some pretty high details. So maybe in my pencil tool options, I want to keep a good accurate fidelity to it, something that gives me a little bit more accurate kind of lines. The other thing I want to do is I'll turn off my fill color strokes. I just want to see an outline, but I do want to keep it selected and be able to edit within certain paths. Here's what this comes in handy with, editing paths and keeping it selected. If I was to draw a path and stop, and then move my cursor again and start drawing, you can see there's a little gap between the two. Sometimes I want to start drawing again and connect to this line. So if I move my cursor in real close, do you see the little X that's following my cursor? If I get close in, it's going to remove the X, and now when I continue drawing, it adds on to that line. So if I want to continue drawing and I've accidentally picked up my mouse, this will allow me to add on to the line that I already have. Now if I'm too far away and you see the X, it's going to start a new line by itself. But this allows me to continue drawing without having to reconnect and rejoin the paths that I have. Okay, enough of this. Let's actually jump in and see the flame that we can draw. Grab your pencil tool. I'm going to start off at the bottom, and very quickly I'm going to outline the look of it. I know I'm running off the edge. You can do a better job than what I'm doing. I'm going very quick. Again, getting as many points as I can back down to the beginning. Not too bad. If I need to move some of these points around, this is where I would choose my white arrow direct selection tool and maybe move this point back up to here to be more pointed and move it over here, something like this. We'll back out, and zoom back in from here. Since I have a black outline and no fill color, what I want to do is to swap this out so that I can at least see my black and fill it in this way. And so now I've got my flame created. The final thing I wanted to show you is how to create a compound path. I'm going to quickly redraw this and show you, let's see if I can do a better job. Grab my pencil tool again. This time I made a mistake and I want to not draw in that little flame, little white flame at the very top edge of it. So I'm going to draw over it and I'm going to cut out that inside edge. Bear with me for a second. There we go. Now when I cross it up, this part right up here, you can see I didn't draw in this inside flame. Now what I could do is just simply change my fill color to white and I could draw the inside of it. Let's move it out of the way. Change it to white. Make sure you deselect what you have. Grab my pencil tool and draw it off. And I could fill it in white. And place it right there. Not too bad. The problem is that's not exactly what I want. I actually want to be able to cut out that particular area. I want this white to be completely transparent. And we can see it better if I perhaps move it off to the edge. So let's move both of these over to here on this gray area. Now you can see that it's actually white. In order to cut out this shape from the black shape, we want to create what's called a compound path. I'm going to select both of these just by clicking and dragging over them. Go up to Object, and then down to Compound Path down at the very bottom and choose Make. Notice Command 8 is the keyboard shortcut. Watch what happens when I make the compound path. It cuts out that inner point. What I've done is I've told the illustrator that anything that's inside of this object, any other objects, treat it as one thing, but cut it out on the inside. Think of it as like making a donut hole. Now I've actually created the flame the way it should be, and I can place it inside of here. Again, I would add the details, follow the instructions that the book will give you, and this will give you everything that you need. All right, final thing to note, remember, you're going to be doing all 8 of the icons from here. And again, you can look at these and get a pretty good idea of what they should look like. I can see for the little zigzag on the water here, hey, I could draw multiple lines and join them together. Some of these I may have to use my drawing tools to freeform draw those. Other things may be a little bit easier than others. For instance, this ranger's hut right here can easily be made up of different objects in different shapes. I'll leave those up to you. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you this class and the next class, which will be next Tuesday. We'll continue working on this particular project. But by next Thursday, I hope to be able to jump into the second project, Project 2, and we'll move on from there. If you do have any questions or problems, feel free to email me or ask a teacher if he's available right now, and I'll see you next class. All right, bye-bye.